to view. Spring might actually, you might actually get more followers than Leo Laporte on Twitter before you know it. Who knows? But this is the kind of stuff you got to get out there. You got to break out the equipment and get the work done. There's a lot of elbow grease, but none of it's rocket science. So that's great. A lot of times when you come and you talk about social media, the assumption is that a lot of the stuff that happens in social media is luck. Oh great, so you got lucky, so you got one guy to write one article. Well, all this stuff started happening in social media. Like I said, my background was community already, and I knew search engines already. And I guess about 3.5 years ago, I met a guy named William Hurley, and he took a liking to me because we both had sign XPs. Isn't that gay or what? I think that's exactly why you started talking to me. So William was running bar camp, and he and I connected at this event. And he, at that point in time, was not working at BMC yet, but he kind of knew what I was doing. And I guess a few months after he and I had met, he said, look, I've got this new job at BMC, and I need to make a splash. I need people to notice that I've arrived. And basically the mandate was BMC suffered from being one of the top 10 software companies in the world that no one had ever heard of. People knew of their products. People in the enterprise who used the products could name what the products were, but they necessarily didn't know, that BMC was as big as, say, a Sun or an IBM or a Microsoft, and those were their direct competitors. So long story short, and I've done this case study like 1,000,000 times in presentations, but mainly because it was the first one and we hit a home run. Basically, the idea was to launch Worley's blog on the BMC corporate website and get attention for BMC. So how do you do that? The easiest way to get attention is to walk up to a hornet's nest with a stick and just whack it and run away and just get all the hornets furious with you. So that's the approach we took. We literally went over to Wahoo's, and we sat down, and spent some time kind of coming up with some ideas for some blog posts. And he came up with the idea of Microsoft people hate open source hates Microsoft. Let's write a blog post about how Microsoft supports open source, and that'll surely piss everybody off. Key point in this is that Worley knows what he's talking about, number one. So if he's going to write an article that says 7 reasons why Microsoft loves open source, he comes from that background in the open source world, and he already had a lot of street cred there, but he also came up with the specific reasons and backed up what he was saying. Well, in the end, what had happened, launched the blog, the CEO of BMC was in Japan, I think, doing an interview with some Japanese business people, and went to pull up the BMC website to discuss something with them, and the website was down. So the CEO calls the CMO and says, I don't know if it was the same, I won't say his name, but like you can't find it. But basically said, hey, by the way, our website's down and we're a software company. What's going on? So the CMO knew what was going on. He called Worley, and Worley called me. And so essentially what had happened is that single blog post had generated more traffic than the entire corporate website had done in the previous 2 months combined. And you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar company. He got invited to Microsoft to be the moderator on the very first open source panel that Microsoft had ever sponsored at one of their own events. And then he got written up and ended up getting covered in Wired and a couple of other print magazines, so that transferred over to print. And we counted just gobs and gobs of online places where he got referenced. Well, at the end of the day, what that did for us from one single blog post was, this is where our traffic was sitting before it happened, and then here's the day the post hit. So if you look at how that translates into value, essentially we did a benchmark over about a 48-hour period, and people in search engine in the search engine world understand what PR value is. If you're going to go to a link broker and purchase links off a link broker, here's the value at that point in time that you would pay for like a PR9. And so we got mentioned on Slashnet, ZDNet, Dig.com, Network World. We're actually on the homepage of Dig for, I think, about 4.5 days, which is astronomical. Slash.Japan, someone in Buraputo, someone actually converted his blog post into Japanese and Spanish, and we had no idea they'd done it. And those ended up being 2 of the top 10 refers that we got from the post. InfoWorld, it ran in print. So these are the places, just the top places that we counted. as far as trying to put a value on what we had done. And here's, link broker per month, it was $7,500. So if you extrapolate that out over a year, that by itself, if that's all you were counting, is over $90,000 value if you had to go out there and purchase that advertising, not counting the fact that this would be paid advertising. We're talking about editorial content, which in the PR world, if you get something mentioned in editorial as opposed to having an advertisement, the value is anywhere from 2 to 4 times that you would actually pay for it in an ad. So if you took the traditional advertising valuation for this, you're talking about a value from one blog post of over $250,000, and we literally spent 8 hours writing the blog post and some fish tacos. Yes. Yes. It was his. We opened a blog on the BMC site called Opensville. So it was blog.bmc.com/Opensville. And the intent and the point was to have BMC know that Whirly had arrived and have the open source world know that Whirly had arrived. And so we from that standpoint, when all the hits started coming in, I'm like, job well done, and I ran away. But of course the accountants want to see the numbers. So we pulled this up. If you wanted to go back and say, okay, well, what about page views? And if you actually pot a PPC campaign, and these, we just based on open source as 1 word, 2 words, and the word Microsoft. We did some math there on if you had purchased that traffic, it would have been about $200,000. And that is, not even social media, that's a single blog post. So to have somebody, number one, come and tell online marketers that social media doesn't work, well, you'll have a slide deck here that will show that it does, number one. The biggest pushback you'll get from people that are naysayers on social media is that there's no way to measure it. And there's two, these are very legitimate ways that you can measure any other traffic online. And if I can measure a pay-per-click ad by numbers of hits, I can surely measure social media if I can then track back the refer back to a specific place. Oh, that was my big, oh, never mind.